regarding the development of our custom of reciting selichos and about the selichos themselves. The origin of the custom to say selichot before Rosh Hashanah and in the Aseret Yemei Tshuva it comes from Bavel, and it comes from the time of the Chasimas HaTalmud, approximately the 5th century. And it coincides with the development of piyutim that were recited every Shabbat and every Yom Tov. And that really is a creation basically of Rebbe Elazar HaKalir, though we have very few slichot from him. But he wrote piyutim for every Shabbat of the year, and he wrote piyutim naturally for every Yom Tov of the year, and he wrote the bulk of the keynote for Tisha B'Av. He was extremely prolific. And the piyutim were an expression of poetry that somehow took hold within the Jewish people. And therefore they used acrostics, meaning they began every verse with a certain letter. So most of the time it's the alphabet. And if you look in this, our problem is that the printers printed the slichot, so they printed all of it as one paragraph. So you can say slichot for many years and not realize that it's in alphabetical order, that every sentence, it's Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. And also they were able to put their name into the piyut or into the slicha, so that it would be for an eternal memory for them. And the same thing is in the nusach of the tefillos that we have for Yom Noroyim. So the beginning of the Shmoneh Esrei, the first day, is from the Kalir. But the second day, according to the custom of Ashkenaz, was from a Paiton, one of the Balei Tesvos, in the 12th century. And in it, he even describes what happened to him in his lifetime. So he had a son who was taken from him by the Crusaders and raised as a Christian. And he mourned that his entire life. And so in the piyut that he has, he mentions his son, El Chanan B'ni, my son El Chanan. The Rebbeinu Shalom should restore him, but it's hidden in the prayer that we say. So, if you don't know the story, so then it's you're not aware of it. You don't know what, that it just looks like an artifice of language. But in it, he wanted to memorialize his son. And the Ashkenazim of that time understood that, and therefore they put it into the Shachris of Rosh Hashanah. Later generations just did it because their fathers did it. It became a custom. But the historical background is oftentimes not apparent in dealing with the piyutim. So the same thing is true with the selichos. So a great bulk of the selichos is from Bavel in the time of the Gaonim, when you did not have a period of time of great Jewish persecution, relatively speaking. All of this is unbalanced because there never was a good time, but there were worse times. So the Jews in Bavel, first under the Persians, and then under the Babylonians, and then later the Byzantine Christians, and then later the Muslims. So even though they were discriminated against, but they did not suffer the atrocities that the Christians would inflict upon the Jews in Europe in the Middle Ages. It certainly did not experience what our time has seen. So therefore, the tone of the selichos, as you will notice, is personal slicha, right? It's very personal. What we did wrong, God should forgive us. It's an appeal to the mercies of God. The later slichot, and you'll see it especially in the slichot on Erev Rosh Hashanah, because then we're marbe b'slichot, and so almost all Jewish talent over the centuries wrote slichot for Erev Rosh Hashanah. So there are, I know I had a book at home that if you have an anthology of it, there are a few thousand slichot. So you'd have to get up a little earlier in the morning to be able to handle that. But those slichot already are much darker. They already deal with troubles that beset the Jewish people, with the fact that we are so persecuted and isolated. And therefore you have, for instance, you have a slicha Yerushalayim, which all of us remember, right? One of the slichot in Erev Rosh Hashanah. And the whole slicha is about Yerushalayim. So what does that got to have to do with slichot? But that was purposely put there to give us hope, to remind us that even though no matter how dark the exile is, we're going to go back to Yerushalayim. And it's a different tone of the slichot. It's more national, has more to do with what's going to be, and it's much less personal. It's very ironic that Erev Rosh Hashanah is probably the least personal of all of the slichot that we recite, because those are have to do with the national entity and the redemption of the Jewish people. So over the centuries, it's interesting. There was no set slichot. It's whatever the people wanted to say. So there was a format. So we have the format. For instance, we say Ashrei at the beginning. The reason we say Ashrei is because we want to say Kaddish. And so therefore you have to say psukim from the Tanakh in order to say Kaddish. So therefore we say Ashrei. Now Ashrei is natural because it's the one that we know the best, and it's the most common of all of the chapters in Tehillim, and it also is the alphabet, except for the letter Nun, which the Gemara already comments upon. But it's the alphabet, so it sets the format, how it's going to be. Then we have Shomei Tefillah. So we have psukim that the Ribono Shalom hears our tefillah, and we have psukim about the greatness of the Ribono Shalom, the universe that exists, all of the miracles that exist. And all of this leads up to a recitation of the Yud Gimel Midos of Hashem Kerachum V'Chanan, which is the basis of selichos, because based on the Gemara, that whenever you want, we need something kaviyochel from the Ribono Shalom, so this is what we should say to him. We should say the midos, and that it never has zero consequences. It may not have the full consequences we wish, but it always has consequences. So then there became a question of picking and choosing. Which piyutim did you like, and which piyutim didn't you like? Which slichot, so to speak, gained popularity, and which did not? So it's a winnowing process of decided by the Jewish people. Later, it was decided by printers. The people who owned the printing presses really have had a major, major influence in all of Jewish life. You don't recognize that. But for instance, in the Gemara, so they chose which Meforshim they're going to put in the Gemara. So they chose Rashi. Well, that's understandable. But Tosfos, there are various editions of Tosfos. There's the Riyas Okein, there's Rabbeinu Peretz. There are all sorts of different Bali Tosfos. There's the Tosfos Harosh, which is printed as a separate book. And the others are also printed as separate books. So who chose which Tosfos is going in here? The printers. So sometimes the Tosfos is there because it fits the page. Sometimes it's there because the printer was a descendant of that man. He put him in. So we believe that, all of this somehow is guided by heaven. It's not purely random. So we have to say that heaven influenced the printers as to what to put in. So when it came to selichos, it's the same thing. Which selicha are you going to insert? Because there is such a wide variety and an enormous amount of piyutim. So why do you pick this one and not that one? So there arose different customs amongst the Jewish people which exist until today. As to which selichos, the Jewish people do not recite the same selichos every day. Right? So the Sfardim have their own set of, the Eidus HaMizrach have their own set, and they have many more than we do because they're saying for 40 days, and we're saying only for a shorter period of time. And then you had Minig Poland, which chose which ones they were going to say. And then you had Minig Lita, and within Minig Lita itself, there were different ones. There was the Minig of a village called Zamut, which was the Minig of the Gaon of Vilna, which again is not necessarily the ones that we say. So it became a matter of the custom as to which of the slichot would be said. It depended on many different things. Now, in our time, for various reasons that I haven't been able to figure out yet, but there came customs to curtail slichot, to eliminate certain things that we don't say. even though still printed in the book. But we don't say it. So I don't know whether that was, really doesn't make a difference whether it was with rabbinic sanction or not. Because the people do what they want to do. Because I'll say, Ray, I'm at the bar, go out and see what the people do. So, but there's no, so like Erev Rosh Hashanah, when I grew up, they said the whole thing. Took an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours, every word. That's not true today. Not even true here in our synagogue. But just as we did with keynote, that it's not, we don't say them all anymore. Now, whether that's because of the state of Israel or whether because of the way we are, but again, that's the development of a custom. And since the whole thing is custom, so therefore it is subject, let's say, to the vote of the Jewish people, to what they do. And that becomes many times a matter of dispute, God forbid, but it isn't, should not be. Because whatever the custom is, that's the custom, and whatever the custom of the synagogue is, that's the custom of the synagogue. So, selichos, like everything else, is something that's alive. And something that's alive always is subject to adjustment, improvement, etc. The fact that no new selichos have been written for the last 300 years is a question that all the rabbis ask. New keynote have been written, especially about the Shoah, but there's no new piyutim, and the custom of saying piyutim generally has also deteriorated. That was the influence of the Gaon of Vilna. So when we say selichos, we should realize that we're involved in a process and in a living process, and that our words should have value and meaning to us. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashya Omer, Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakos Yisrael, v'chachir b'lahem Torah mitzvah shenemar, Adonai chafetz mantzit kohi avil Torah